Well, thank you for all arriving, and welcome to the first of our 5-week series at the Cooperative Agricultural Network Academy. Today we're starting with one George Siemens from Organic Valley Dairy Cooperative. We've had him speak last year, and we're glad to have him here again.
So just for everybody here, so George is a founding farmer and a former longtime CEO of Organic Valley, which is a nation's largest organic milk co-op. Um, George and a group of farmers formed this co-op back in 1988 in, I think, Lafarge, Wisconsin. Did I say that right, George?
Close enough.
Okay, close enough. And their mission was to create a sustainable pay price so farmers could earn a sustainable living and be able to do more economic planning. And they did this by working as a group to create demand for organic food such as dairy, meat, and eggs. This has helped build what is now a $60 billion market for organic products. So thanks, George. We appreciate that. Laying the pavement down for us. And with that, I'll introduce you and turn it over to you, George.
Right. Well, let's see. I mostly have always seen myself as a naturalist, and that led me to being a back to the lander, and that led me to organic farming. But I was raised a business person, and so ended up and snookered in being a businessman. And now I'm retired and just really enjoying being a country person. So, but I do like to share whatever I can. So I appreciate the opportunity. I think ownership structures is a big question. You hear a lot of talk against capitalism. Business is actually a force of good, it can be a force of goodness, or it can be a force of greed. So really it's the ownership structure that defines that. I've spent 30 years running a co-op and founding a co-op, and I'm all for co-ops, but I've also now recently been getting more and more involved in trust ownership.
Eva DuVernay's origin is a brilliant.
And trust ownership, we'll get into some of the things about co-ops and why I see trust ownership being another stage. But either way, co-ops are, like we're hearing from the brother from Break the Cycle, is a collective action form. And so it's really about people doing collective action. So I'll try to talk. I just don't know what level you all want to be at here, but I'll just do a little basic introductions to co-ops in general for starters. It's just a business structure like a corporation. The difference is it's member base versus shareholder base. You could argue the members are shareholders too, but it's getting away from the drive of how much is a company worth, how much money would make, what's the exit strategy, into a mission and long-term perspective and base. And so usually it's a single stakeholder. And this is a theme I'll follow through my talk today, is that the question of single stakeholder, which is like the farmer co-op or the food co-op, retail consumers. And the what I think is the new challenge is how do we have multi-stakeholder involvement, so you still don't have one group as the authority. So a little challenge I'll have throughout here, and part of my experience. There's all kinds of co-ops. The kind that most people don't realize is pretty big in America, or co-ops that are supply co-ops. And so there's a great big co-op. I'm not going to say the name, of all the independent carpet buyers buy their carpet together through a supply co-op. You would never know they were a co-op. It's a local carpet store, but they all buy their carpet through a unified buying function. So True Values, all those kind of places are also group purchasing. It's really the more all kinds of people work together on that level. A purchasing co-op is one co-op. You can have a co-op, the farmer types, or a supply co-op that they're largely bringing production together and selling it, and at the most basic raw level. Versus another one would be a processing co-op that goes into processing the business, whatever the product is. and move into ingredient sales, not just raw sales. And then you also have marketing type co-ops that actually do all of the things that they sell, um, the branded products and ingredient products as well as raw products. And that's what Organic Valley was or is. Organic Valley is a brand name for the co-op that I was part of starting. And the bigger name is Crop Cooperative. And that started out meaning a local name here. This area where I live is called the Cooley region. But in the long run, we became the Cooperative Regions Organic Producer Pools, which is appropriately what we were, producers all over the nation. So Crop Cooperative was a marketing cooperative that did supply co-op processing and branded products. So, we know about retail stores, electric co-ops, communication co-ops. They There's no end to the types of co-ops you can have. There are some tax advantages for co-ops, but mostly it's a structure that just fits the collective action. You can pass your profits on to the members versus paying taxes at the farm level, at the co-op level. Some states don't have income tax for co-ops, so there are some tax advantages, but mostly it's just a different structure that's membership-based ownership. So it's pretty generic things. Why do people start co-ops? Often a shortage of infrastructure, or a shortage of marketing, like pioneering, like we were a pioneer in organic food and pioneer in organic livestock products. So we had to take on ourselves to build the marketplace that wasn't there. So that was a pioneering type co-op. The electric co-ops are very interesting. They basically, the private people didn't want to serve the rural people because it wasn't profitable. So the rural people were falling behind in electric unification. The United States started an effort to start co-ops and fund co-ops, have electricity everywhere. It's very similar to what they're doing now for Wi-Fi, but it's not necessarily going through the co-op structure. The rural America always lags behind. So the electric co-op was was an advantage of infrastructure things. Uh, Sometimes you want to start a co-op because they're just one buyer and they just feel really frustrated. They don't really know if they're getting a good deal or not. So a co-op can be a competitor and make sure that the playing field is honest. Versus when there's only a single or a great big one, you don't have that kind of you feel always that maybe they're not being as honest or fair as possible. Co-ops, give you a sense of control, the access to reality. You may think the middleman makes all the money, but when you form a co-op and you become the middleman, you usually find out there ain't that much money anywhere. It's just all about good business, so to speak. So, but still a sense of control, access to what it really means to be a business. And so you really get a sense of it. But one of the problems co-ops have is they inevitably, in maturation in the farmer co-op world, they don't necessarily pay more than the private people, and people start complaining that co-ops aren't really providing a benefit, but you don't know what the market would be necessarily if you didn't have the co-op. So you have to watch out for the no real benefit, but in general, co-ops aren't necessarily cheaper or to buy from or any that much less overhead because business takes what it takes. Co-ops, are a group process. And if I have a theme today, the theme is people need to learn how to work together. And if you're going to do a co-op or if you're going to do any number of things, there's all kinds of questions of governance and roles and how to step out of what you know, which is, for example, a farmer milking cows. You know that well, you know how to run that business. That doesn't necessarily mean you're automatically a genius about running a branded business. That means you have a lot of background, but how do you move? It's a skill set to start moving into another business like a co-op represents. And it can be challenging too that way. A co-op is nothing magical. It can be sold or dismantled. There's no forever to it. Some of the trust things that I'm working on have more safety nets to not be sold. But either way, no matter what structure you have, if everybody that's in the governance role agrees it's time to throw it towel in, you throw the towel in. And so that's and it takes a lot of membership loyalty, and that's a hard thing because, as I said earlier, once you hit majority, sometimes you're not doing that much better than your private competitors, and people, well, well, it's still good to be engaged, and it's still good to have the competitive insights to the marketplace. So those are just a little generic co-op uh, guidelines. I didn't do a lot of research on it, but I just wanted to make sure I start out with some generic things. So I'd be glad to pause now if there's any questions. I'll talk about my experience at Organic Valley next, and then later talk about some of the challenges I see. So any basic questions about what a co-op is from words so far?
Thanks,
right.
George. That was a perfect intro. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no sense not talking about the basic thing, you know. So, you know, it's my experience at Organic Valley was very unique. We succeeded wilder than you could ever imagine. So I just can't say that I can see that it's that easy to do what we did, you know, because timing is a lot, the right vibes, the right mixture of things, and I was fortunate enough to be in that zone through the experience of Organic Valley. And so I'll just tell our story. It's a good story. It's awesome. You know, in the Midwest, and I'm sure it's somewhat the same in your region, but, you know, we had the traditional family farms, people with small farms, family labor, and working very hard. And in the 50s and 60s and 70s, it just started closing down and people were moving to the city and becoming factory workers. And, you know, you just went through this whole cultural experience of watching something slowly die off. And yet there's such a love for the small family farms. And finally in the 80s, there was tremendous bankruptcies. People who just weren't making it, suicides, government foreclosures, just a really hard time. And so in the early 80s, there was the last hurrah of farm activism, because farmers have definitely gone through eras of being populist activists and that kind of thing. And so there was a real charge of activity that happened. Farm aid got started, for example, as a means to raise money to try to save family farms. And uh, you know, people were hauling manure to DC and spreading manure on the steps of the USDA, and it was a good time. But it was all headed towards the 1985 Farm Bill. And 1985 Farm Bill came and went, and nothing happened. And so, pretty disheartened farm activist world. Fortunately, the group in Wisconsin here was the radical group. They picked himself up and said, the government's not going to do anything for us. We need to start working on value-added co-ops, which is really quite a responsible step for someone to take that lead. I won't want to take credit for that, but one of their board members lived in our hometown here, and we had a big problem here in this region. Oddly enough, in Wisconsin, growing 2 to 3 acres of tobacco had long been part of farming and part of being a dairy farmer. People milked 20 cows and raised 2 acres of tobacco. Tobacco gave them the once a year check that was big enough to pay the taxes or buy a new car or a new tractor. And the dairy paid the monthly bills and got by. So tobacco was a big cultural issue here, and the the tobacco industry has started to buy tobacco overseas, and we're banning whole regions of tobacco area, and our region was getting abandoned, and the farmers were left with no market. So this individual had the dream that we'd replace organic tobacco with organic vegetables. I mean, regular tobacco market with organic vegetables. So now you get into the classic great idea, terrible business plan. You know, of course, you want to replace tobacco, but now we're talking about a bunch of old time Norwegians trying to teach them how to move into organic produce. And so we started a co-op in the first year. We were terribly idealistic. Um, and we took on the hardest marketing thing there is in the produce world, which is small seasonal producers. So you hardly have anything to sell in April, May, and then all of a sudden you have way too much in August, and then all of a sudden November you just got root crops, and really a tough business. And we went forward. There was such uh, a sense that organic markets could save family farms. And we were genuine about saving family farms, and that just alone was a ticket to get support. Everybody, you know, even people couldn't even say the word organic or even said they didn't believe in organic, but they could see that it could really help family farms. And so they were willing to support us in the ways they could. So we really had that going from us from day one. Within a few months, though, I was finding that most of the people I knew that were organic were dairy farmers, because dairy has a perfect combination of rotations, manure, and animals that shows a lot of the true benefits. And so I took the lead in the first year to say, well, what about organic dairy? So that, of course, became that saved the co-op and made us into a viable business in the long run. It was a natural fit, though. And, you know, there was, like I said, people organic. We finally then started organic dairy with 7 dairy farmers in Wisconsin. We were the first certified organic in the nation. And we did a lot of things right. And the biggest thing we did right was look for partners and be partner oriented versus being terribly righteous and being down on the conventional world. We got the conventional milk hauler to haul our milk. We hired them. We got a local cheese factory to make our cheese. We hired them. And even though they thought we were all going to fail, they liked our mission, they liked our attitude, and they took a chance on us. The first egg production plant that we used, it took them longer to change the cartons out than it did to wash the eggs. So few eggs went through. And after 20 years, we were 5 days of their production out of 7. So they took a chance on us, and it worked out. So the attitude of working with people was something that we did that was different. A lot of the other people, you know, just like I said, were just too full of how right they were and how the other people have been screwing them, all that kind of good stuff. So we also were very, very lucky because we went to the more radical dairy co-op in the nation. They never said they were a co-op, but a group called National Farmers Organization. I was a member of National Farmers Organization. One of their major things was farmers have a unique legal ability to collective bargain and collude on prices. It's a little known, little used law, but farmers actually can collude on prices. So they were advocating that, you know, farmers got to stand up and collude on prices so they can make a living. And they were kind of the radical group. We went to them. We said we think organic dairy is possible, and we asked them if they'd be willing to sponsor us. So we took a huge leap by going and joining up with another co-op and asking them to fund us for a startup. They, of course, liked our Save Family Farms, and they were looking for ways to do it. So they did. They chose to fund us, and so really big deal. We'd have never ever succeeded if we hadn't had a. Because then all of a sudden I went to a cheese maker or a milk hauler or whatever I was doing. I was part of NFO, and even though they were radical, they at least existed. They had paid their bills, and compared to some long-haired dreamer showing up and that kind of good stuff. So really made a difference that we did that. And when we started, there was like all of a sudden there was all kinds of groups wanted to start up and be organic dairy. Most all of them failed or merged with us, and it was mostly because they built a plant before they had the business. So we adopted the strategy: you don't build a plant unless you have built the business first, and because it's easy to get too excited about ideas and have business plans that usually aren't that effective. Fortunately, also at that time, most of the natural food industry was co-op businesses, like the retail stores, but more importantly, there was a whole natural food co-op distribution system that covered the nation, and was glad to see an organic dairy cooperative start. And we got good support right away from that network. And that was part of why we succeeded, was that cooperation that was happening across the farmer, the distributor, and the retailer. Unfortunately, in the long run, the distributing co-ops all merged into the unified company, public company, all absorbed and took over all the co-ops, which we'll get to later about why co-ops have not succeeded as much as they should. You know, we were foolish, but we had just the real essence of the diverse group of people. I always like to quote the Margaret Mead quote of if you have a diverse group of people that share a mission, anything's possible, or whatever the quote is. Well, that's what we experienced. But we were trying to start a new market, a new production method, and we were starting a new business without any experience in that business. So by rights, we should have not made it, but that we were fortunate with the timing and some really good leadership, and not just myself. We had really good mixture of people that were dedicated. We were paid $5 an hour after the first year, then $7. We were too far into it to even, and we really didn't even know. It wasn't so much that we were going to succeed. We were just so disheartened and disgusted with the normal farm act outreach, in the way that the markets was so frustrating. Because when you milk cows, you work hard. I milk cows for 20 years. You walk out to the mailbox, you get your check. This month you're paid $10. Next month you're paid 12, then 11, then 9, then 13. And it's just like, can you imagine working and not knowing what you're getting paid every month? It's pretty frustrating. So we really didn't even, most of the dairy farmers that joined us in the early years, they all had the same attitude. I'm tired of milking cows in a system that's not giving me a profitability. I'm willing to quit now. I'm going to go organic, and it either works or it doesn't work. So it's a great attitude to have, because then all of a sudden you're doing it because you want to do the right thing versus where the hell you're going. And that was just basically our drive forward. So the diverse group, we had hardcore farmers, and we had plenty of the back to the landers who brought a lot of skill set, into the things, and we had a lot of supporters. We had the Amish community, we had the co-op community, we had the tobacco community, we had a lot of supporters at the state level. Wisconsin's a co-op state. We were one of the few co-ops starting at that time, and we were certainly one of the most successful business stories they've had. So, you know, so we came upon a model, and we built a model, and we grew that model, and it took us places we never thought we'd go to. We were just a regional co-op in Wisconsin. We had some good friends in Minnesota that wanted to start a co-op. We gave them all of our foundation papers, everything we did, say, go ahead, that's great. We never imagined we'd move to Minnesota, but finally they called us up and said, why don't you just hire a truck to come across the river and pick up our milk and go with that? We ended up in 34 states in the nation, had a drunken affair of 10, 15 years of going around and starting organic dairy everywhere. And it was really great. In every state, we found somebody that was a really highly respected farmer in the area. And that leader would get excited and lead us into another pool somewhere else. So it was, you go to Pennsylvania, especially with the drinking milk is a regional thing. So that really drove us forward. Probably without drinking milk, we would have stayed more concentrated, but with drinking milk, and at that time it was all HDSD or short live. So it was necessary to start these pools all over. But we usually had a mixture of ingredient business. You all know West Coast, Nancy's Yogurt's a great example. When we started our Oregon pool or Washington pool, Nancy's took there's 3.5 days a week of pickups equivalent, and they took one, and We took 2 to bottle milk, and we took another one to an ice cream person, and off we went. So having the diverse people, having good people like Nancy's is a great example of people who knew this is something they wanted to do and did it. But again, the partner base is very important. We hired everybody to produce our product. You could say it's a cost of production to do co-packing. That's a mixed bag. There's nothing higher cost than building a building that you only half use in the world, and so we took more so of being glad to pay a higher fee to have the flexibility. And if somebody wanted to make a ricotta cheese, we just found a ricotta cheese maker in our network and made ricotta cheese. So we avoid a lot of the capital costs. Funding is a big deal, and starting a co-op. Really, co-op has to have it really can't come from the do-gooders down, even though like we had this group that said this is the way. You got to sooner or later have the groundswell of members that want this to happen, are willing to work hard at it, and in the long run do some financing. So funding is tough. In our case, though, we had right away. We were paying farm milk was $12, and we were at $14-15. In the beginning, we were paying that premium. In those days, that was a big premium and very hopeful. Here we were getting more for doing something we thought was the right way anyway. So we always had the backup that if we had to, we could cut into our farmer premium, but that's kind of like a wrong direction all the way. And we hardly used it, but it was comforting to have a backup. We can always pay the farmers less if we had to. So that was our backup plan, but we never used it hardly. We made our farmers invest in the co-op. All we made them, the way I sold it, was that I take your milk in today. I don't get the cash for that milk for 60, 70 days. And so we asked the farmers to produce 20 days worth of payables to their farm. So they were just giving us the gasoline to run the tractor, so to speak, for their production. So we made them invest. We made the mistake. That wasn't a mistake, but it was to put their investment in preferred stock. So we actually paid a dividend on it, which was fine, but in general, shouldn't be paying a dividend you don't earn money on. But the logic goes, we pay the bank for money, why wouldn't we pay farmers? I wouldn't advise to be obligated to pay a dividend on money you're not earning in the future, after my experience. So that was funding, but then we pretty early on, someone brought us the concept of preferred stock. And so we sold some preferred stock in the first year or two, and that's to the community, and them taking a chance on us. We really didn't raise too much money, but then we had the good fortune of, with this original sponsor, of making it. Once you make it, then all of a sudden it changes. People before were just rolling their eyes thinking, well, anytime they'll fall over. But once you get to, oh, they're really making it, we started selling preferred stock, and it became our financial backbone. Preferred stock is a glorified loan. People give you money, but instead of it, it comes on your book as equity, because they don't have the right to demand their money. They have the right to request their money. And so there's a big difference, because now it's equity, like owner equity, and it's behind the banker. So bankers love preferred stock in a lot of ways, but we offered 6% at first. And it was amazing in the long run how many people came, and just local people here that just sold their farm, had money, and they just didn't want to know what to do with the stock market. They never had the stock market, and they would invest $50,000 in us. It was shocking to see how successful it was. We've always paid a dividend on it. We've always returned the money. We've never not returned it. But again, they can request it. They can't require it. No matter what, we continue to pay the interest level. In the long run, then we went down to 4%. And not necessarily that I agree with that, but that's what we did. And in the long run, we raised over $50 million to build our business. So between bank loans, farmer investment, and preferred stock, we somehow managed to build a business all the way up to $1.2 billion without any outside venture capital. So miracle. We also were very active as national leaders, and we had to be, but it was also in our nature that we were doing this for the bigger farm community, the bigger consumer society. And so we were the pioneer in livestock. Oddly enough, I have an animal science degree, so I was the first organic animal scientist in the United States, is what I like to say. I might even be the only ones, who knows, but we really had representative farmer voice. We were really involved in the national law, just still are today. Organic Valley is at a leading advocacy in trying to get the government to do right by organics. I mean, organics is a strange affair. We went to DC and said we want strict standards. We want stricter standards, and not many groups go to DC and say we want more rules. You know, we want tough regulations. But basically, organics has always had that kind of a thing. Really tried hard to keep the members engaged. We had a whole leadership structure and that engaged, because we now had the difficulty of trying to form a national co-op and having members in Oregon and Pennsylvania and Maine and New Hampshire. How do you make them feel like they're part of a national group? So we put quite a bit of effort into that. People were excited, learn as we go. We're very fortunate all along about the employees. We live in a small rural area here. We provided employment, good employment, meaningful employment. You certainly can't underestimate how different it is for people to work someplace that is meaningful. People want meaningful work in the world. And so we were very lucky. I have to admit, being a little bit off the wall, or maybe a lot off the wall, struggled trying to incorporate professionals. They're so straight line thinkers. We were so used to going with the flow and making it happen and being creative and out of the box, that it was a struggle to keep bringing professional people in who just had a certain way they wanted to look at it. So it was not easy. Somebody told me when you hit $1 billion, you have to change the way you manage. It was a real struggle, and I struggled after $1 billion to keep up with the management demands of the company. I'll stop there with the positive news, the good news. I'm going to go into some of our challenges next, but I'll just stop and see just on our success. Any questions or anything people like to ask about?
Amazing, George. Amazing.
It was amazing. We had a lot of fun too. And I was bold. I came to meetings barefooted, and they didn't know what to think about that. I obviously smoked pot. But it was all good. We at maturation, before I left, Organic Valley was almost a $1.2 billion company. We had over 2,000 farmers in 34 states and almost 1,000 employees. Really big, complicated world, and overall doing fairly well. Like I said, there was a transition into professionalism that I would admit was a struggle for me, and still is at Organic Valley. It's professionals tend to be a little bit of a 3 or 4 years and they move on, or it's been a little different. But we did start having dissatisfaction in the farm community, definitely as organic grew. If in the organic dairy world, if there was a shortage of milk, people would start paying a lot more. If there was too much milk, they'd pay less. Well, meanwhile, we were saying, no. We want to be involved in the supply demand. We want to have a stable price farmers can count on. So we didn't want to go up real high when the market was short and knowing we'd have to go down. We were more the steady at it type. And so then all of a sudden people would come and try to steal our farmers and pay more. And inevitably we've paid more than anybody overall, but in the short run, all of a sudden I can get paid this much of the neighbor, so this other group. And so you started getting maybe farmers a little spoiled and what have you done for me lately? And I was still trying to save the world. And it started to be like some of the things we were doing were luxuries versus serving the farmers. Well, that's not true in my mind because we're building a brand. Organic Valley is what you call an iconic brand now. It got iconic because we were out there doing good and leading good and not just doing what everything was all about, paying the farmers more. But inevitably, started to be more and more farmers saying, trying to save the world versus earn more money. And then, and this is generic stuff, by the way, this isn't just Organic Valley. You start getting more distrust of management. Comments like nobody should make over $40,000 ever or $60,000. Well, you run $1 billion company, you're paying more than $60,000. You can't do anything but say that. So you start getting into a little, and I think it's a problem of co-ops is in success is you start running into a kind of a distrust of the co-op and that kind of thing. So we definitely had some of that came up. My one of my takeaways of all my experiences is humans just don't know how to cooperate very well. There's people get into power struggles and conflicts, and just look around, listen to the news any day, and you can see that. It's a miserable the actual skill of governance in the nation, and a board is one of the top 5 risks if any business. A board can go the wrong direction, be authoritarian, they can be selfish. I'm sure all of you can tell a story where you've been in some collective process where the board dynamics became just too weird to understand and too many human factors. So no matter what structure you do, governance is going to be one of the top issues you face, and your board is going to be one of the top risks you have. In the long run, my board started having more and more closed sessions. In the long run, they asked me to leave, and I did. So they thought there was too much fat, too much luxury, too much saving the world, and I didn't agree with that because I was trying to build a brand. I was trying to be a partner with Patagonia and Dr. Bronner's and all the other radical groups out there. Yeah, and Organic Valley, is important brand building because we never advertised and yet we built a brand. And so it became so one of the things when we started the co-op, we really considered having the employees be part of the ownership. And sometimes farmers thought they were because they were such a team building. But in the long run, I was regretful I hadn't found a way to make it so farmer centric. So it's all about the farmers versus it's about the consumer, about the employees. And this goes back to what I started my talk was about. One of the things I'm really looking for now is how you have multi-stakeholders involved. So you don't have this human tendency to become authoritarian and selfish, is whoever's in charge has that ability to do it. There's a good chance they'll do it. So how do you we had our first generation group of leaders. They were great leaders. The second generation, and this is pretty common in most business function, came in and saying, what have you done for me lately? So we went from this, wow, I can't believe we're doing this, to what have you done for me lately? I consider all these things generic human traits. I could point that I failed somehow, that I weren't able to build a better culture, but I don't think we know how to work together and how to cooperate. And it's easy once you start doubting management. You're doing a wage survey, and the board would say to me, well, we'd believe it if we had done it instead of management doing it, like they didn't trust that we weren't going to try to up our wages but through this. And so you just started getting more and more challenges, and I think it's part of maturation. It's fun to start a co-op, but it's harder maybe to keep it going long standing with leadership and with member involvement. So that was my, I don't know if it was unfortunate or not. I'm very proud of what Organic Valley did, but definitely the farmers have gone through a last few years since I've been gone with, they can manage the business. And now after 5 years, they're realizing they can't manage the business and they need to get back to trusting management and getting good management and that kind of thing. But it's a struggle, and I think it's pretty can happen anywhere. So what we just see, what was that chat AI? They fired the CEO, the board did, and 3 days later they brought him on. A month later they put him on the board. The CEO is like, wow, some humans dynamics there, I'll tell you that going on. So so that's that stage. Any questions and answers? A friend of mine used to say, if you've got questions, I've got answers. You've got
There was a
answers.
question.
Got questions. Go ahead.
First, Indy, I think you had one.
Yeah, I was just gonna I had a question on your successes and the timing of that success, and you spoke on that a little bit, the vibe. And it seemed like, farmers were just fed up with, going to the mailbox and not knowing when they're gonna get paid or how much. Um, and just foreclosures and farmer depression and all that. Can you speak a little bit more on the timing? Like, what else do you think might have been lining up just right,
Mhm.
which led to that success?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first thing is just the organic law passed in 1990. We started in 88. So all of a sudden you have a stamp of approval by the USDA. It doesn't matter that it took 10 years to implement. It doesn't matter that it was, you had um, that validity. Without that, I'm not sure what it would have happened. But one of the things that's unique in America as compared to Europe is that's surprising, and what didn't happen to the mid 90s, but a really big factor in the United States is they all got the big Walmarts of the world got really uptight about Whole Foods. They're doing awful good. Are we missing the boat? Are we missing the boat? And you had Fred Meyer's and all the chains out west everywhere start carrying organic food. And that busted us out. The natural food was very small, the co-ops and all that. But all of a sudden you've got, and today Walmart and Costco are the biggest movers of organic food in the United States, huge movers of organic food. So in Europe, for some reason, the big chains haven't embraced organics as much. So they don't have near the market share we have. Organics in the United States is small, as frustrated as we are, that hasn't grown more or it's flattened out. It's very successful. Organic milk, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the milk sold in the United States is organic, depending on the store. That's all about the chain stores, and the big stores. So that was a major deal, was that freight of Whole Foods and start jumping rather than being left out. And so that market wise, that was a big deal.
Totally.
It is really important to do something because you believe in it, and even if you fail, you just had to do it. You just had to do this. You just had to. And the farmers really were that way, and I was that way. I quit milking cows right when the co-op started. I started in again a year later because I was tired of I just didn't feel like it was economically worthwhile, and there must be something better to do. And that's when organic comes up, then that's an opportunity.
And we had another question in the chat. I'm sorry.
Yeah. One of the most unique things I haven't said about the co-op that really blows my mind still is we didn't see this one coming. Right away, we got the Amish community in our local area here approved of our efforts. They approved of who the leaders were, because the Amish really have to trust in people's integrity. And when I left Organic Valley, almost 40% of the members were plain communities, Amish, Mennonite. Today, it's over 50, going on 60%. So the co-op on its own organically has grown into serving the plain folks. But there's another reason for that. so many small family farms have disappeared, and the Amish Mennonite continue to thrive, horses and all. So it's pretty interesting that somehow we've become a plain folks co-op without trying, and just a natural thing. And now I'm happy to say we have two plain folks on the board, and they bring a huge value-based system. I can't imagine Organic Valley would ever be sold for the money with the Amish as such a backbone of them, because the last thing they would ever dream about was hurting the future market opportunity for their children and grandchildren. So pretty unique thing that we did that, and it takes a special kind of outreach to work with them. We certainly quickly learned about women going in shorts to the Amish school houses. So
I actually just kind of thought about our local Mennonite community and how we can also introduce ourselves better. But I had a question in the chat here I was hoping you can get to.
all right.
Somebody, Huey P. Smith, was asking, when do you decide in a co-op environment to assign individuals to speak and lead the group in different target areas? And it's a two-part question. And how do you get everyone on board with finding and agreed upon representatives to lead?
Boy. All right, I lost your picture here. I don't know if you, well, that's a
I'll
great.
restate it.
No, well, no, I think I heard you, and you know, first off, leadership's hard in a lot of ways. I I really resisted being a CEO and a leader. I kept talking every year, you know, I'm going to quit soon. I'm just doing this to get it started, you know, but I had to come to grips with, number one, people want leadership. They want somebody to get up there and talk, you know, so I had to accept that role. You know, and so, but we would, what we did a lot was we used the members as advisors, and employees were the leaders. Now I'm talking about who goes to DC and talks to this, or who goes to Whole Foods and does sales. Most of the actual business leadership was the employees. The farmers, though, we were very fortunate to have several farmers that were very engaged in helping out. So the difficult question is, say, how you get approval. We had a voting process. So if the dairy pool had their own group and they picked their leaders, but they, again, they were following the management lead. So we were using the management as much as I use the farmers as advisors. I tell them all the options, tell them what we're considering. We talk it out, we get input. Sometimes we vote, but mostly it was just a co-evolution. And I became the talking head for all processes. And so I was the leader at some level. Leadership, you know, I always say authority is a funny word. Authority really is about authorship. So you find that some people just start making proposals, and those are the people that inevitably take over and lead. So I think, yeah, that's a really hard question to answer, but overall, it's faith in your dedication to the mission, and, you know, and trying to grow together. Since we didn't know what we were doing, it was much easier to kind of talk about it and come to a mind, versus if I had been a CEO with previous experience, I probably would have been talking down to them. Instead, we were peers talking, what the hell do you think we should do now? And we failed a lot, and that didn't bother us a bit, you know, because another learning experience. Yeah, not do it that way again. So the collectiveness came from our dedication. So
Totally.
so that's
So it
hard.
looks like we have one more question, but I was hoping to get that done and then maybe wrap it up in like 5-6 minutes if we can do that. How's that sound?
All right.
Jeff, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tough one. If you could look into your crystal ball here, George. You said something about, you know, seasonal markets and, you know, seasonal crop. As a cannabis farmer outdoor, you know, we have a seasonal crop. And I heard you know, what rang a bell to me was that it's really hard to market that, and it's hard to you know, make that happen. And with our cannabis too, it degrades very quickly, and we see it go to the shelf. We see sales slow, and we see product returned. What I've noticed, I've been looking at some seasonal stuff. There's a French potato that they sell that's over $300 or $400 a pound for these potatoes. So is that a marketing aspect to try to fix this seasonal and make more of a demand and see some profits? How would you deal with it?
Yeah, well, that's and of course meanwhile you have indoor competing with you, that's able to do the
Exactly.
year-round freshness. So the dream is always that you're gonna be such a attractive and good story and a sexy story that people are gonna want to buy your product and pay a premium, It's a good dream, and it should be the way it is. People should look forward to get the taste of outdoors and that kind of thing. Overall, I'm a little cautious anymore with the experience I had that the consumers are not as responsible to this as you want them to be. I was disappointed with consumers personally. Because we all talk to ourselves and we think we got the best damn idea on earth, but the consumers are a little different. They're not as engaged as we want them to be. Our major competitor was Horizon Dairy, and to the last day, we would do a survey, not that I really believed in those surveys, and 40% people thought Horizons was a co-op and 40% the Organic Valley was a co-op. So here I tried to sell, we're a co-op. This is different for 30 years. And it was really, really hard. It was like almost we were too big to be seen as a small farmer co-op. I couldn't explain why I couldn't get more consumer lift with all the anti-capitalism stuff, why a co-op wouldn't have got more lift. So I believe in the dream, but meanwhile, back at the ranch, it depends on the consumer. So there's so much, I talking to you all before, there's so hard, but there's so much I don't want to say crime, but there's not, cannabis is not all pretty right now in California, so to speak, and,
No.
and I would think people would be really happy to support people like you all. And, otherwise learning how to stop the degrading is the obvious thing that you all work on, how can you keep that fresh look and, yeah. So
Totally.
I've taken my time here. There's lots of different co-ops, though. I really gotta make sure, there's ways to work together without maybe necessarily even doing the business. This right here is what you're doing right here is perfect. This is networking. Here in Wisconsin, they've started watership groups. It's really neat. The government gives them $5,000 a year to do to discuss how to take care of the water. Most of it's bought. They buy beer and sit around and talk every few weeks, and it seems to work real well. So that's go to the roots with your networking and get people talking about issues. So there's all kinds of advocacy groups, networking, and collective bargaining. That's obviously you all are at the whim of the market, and the only way to control the whim of the market is supply controls. And if that's not realistic, then what's the right target price? Say I need $1,000 a pound, I need $1,200 a pound. Get right out there and preach it regularly, because sooner or later suppliers have to come back to what it really takes to have good suppliers. There's always Johnny New supply that comes in cheaper, but Johnny New supply is not you all old school supply that is more steady and dependable. So I challenge you all before, is there any distributors that are sensible enough to try to support, the long haul here? That's a question, looking for a partner. So there's lots of ways to work together. Co-op could be a hard way, but if there's a real need and you got committed members, it's really exciting. I can't tell you how thankful farmers were to break out of the mold and go out and be on their own. Just tell the system, we're going to go do our own thing. Thank you. It made them so happy and so excited to break out. So
I feel it. Yeah. And yeah, thank you so much for your time here today, George. I think we're going to transition into a little bit of movement building and our group vision, and we'll talk about CAN for a second before we
Yeah.
kind of retrospect. Right.
All right.
Tobin,
I'm going to drop off because I have another engagement, but I always enjoy it. I hope I did
So
some good.
much, George.
I'm
Thanks,
always
Really-
George.
if anybody
Thanks,
wants
George.
free advice, I'm glad to give free advice. So
George, is there any way that we may be able to get a hold of you if we didn't get a chance to ask you a question directly here today?
sure, I'm really not doing much now, so I'm glad to help people write me so they can give you my email address. I'm glad.
Okay, sounds good.
if you have a question, please email us at our Cooperative Agricultural Network email, and we will forward that along to George. I think that would probably would that be acceptable, George?
That's great. And good work, you guys doing this. You got to do it.
Thank you.
Loving
Thanks,
Thank
you.
you
George.
so much.
Okay.
Well, wow, folks. My brain, as usual, is filled with ideas and inspiration after hearing from George. Before we move on, I have a request. It's just a soft request, but if you have the ability to turn on your camera, it really helps for the feeling of connection and collaborative. We're a co-op, so this is very much about being together in the space, not a requirement, just a request. Love to see your faces. I'm Tobin. I'm a cooperative developer. I'm not a cannabis farmer. I'm one of the folks who's largely responsible for the formation of CAN, which is the co-op that is putting on this training. And right off the bat, I just, George's story needs to be our story. You know, it's so similar. Although I can't tell, maybe we have the odds stacked against us in the cannabis industry, more even than he did because of the history, because of the legislation, and the way that the marketplace is going. But just out of curiosity, before I start talking too much, what were some things that George said? Raise your hand if you want to share. What were some things that George said, and this is open to the CAN folks too, that really felt relevant to right now and what we're doing? You know, anybody have anything that just felt like, oh my God, he's talking about us? Yeah, Sean and then Indy.
So yeah, I mean, as we've developed our co-op here in Salmon Creek Legacy, we've definitely hit that struggle with leadership and capacity. And even myself as a founder treasurer, I've always been wondering, like, how do we increase our scale and maintain our member representation and keep our advisors members? And then also, like, as a founder, how do I keep myself from being that reticent leader, which is difficult to, being put in a position of authority that you're not necessarily fully comfortable being, but at least you have to learn to do it if you want to make things happen. And that's kind of just the theme I definitely glean from his work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was so glad to hear him speaking from such direct experience about the reality of human nature. And just, I think to know that in the beginning and to recognize as a co-op developer, I can say that he talked about values over and over. He talked about values and commitment to the vision and the mission. And it's like, that really needs to be our bottom line. And we have to remember it and remind ourselves of it again and again and again, because that's going to be the thing that keeps us together and keeps it from going off the rails. And we know what, once the money gets involved, everything changes. And so it's really interesting. I mean, I think of it personally as being self-reprogramming. We're talking about being anti-capitalist. We're talking about being anti-racist. We're talking about being, you know, feminist. We're talking about being cooperative. We're talking about reprogramming these base tendencies that have just been ground into us from birth. All of our systems are pointing the wrong way, and so it's literally reprogramming yourself. And if you're not doing that, then I think it's going to get the worst of you, not the best of you.
Mhm.
Indy.
Yeah, just something that really rang true with me, and well, just parallels in the cannabis space, and just everything that you were speaking on, Tobin, is the success and timing. You know, um, he attributed a lot of Organic Valley's success to that timing, and whether or not it was an organic act that passed in 1990, 2 years after they were up and running. I really feel like maybe when we started this work, the timing wasn't right. But as timing is going on, and here we are, all looking at possible rescheduling federally for cannabis, and more, just becoming more legal throughout the whole country. We might all be seeing that timing right here on the doorstep, and whether or not, again, going to the Organic Act, whether we can collectively and collaboratively, work on affecting policy or regulation change, is also going to influence that success with the timing. So that was something that I think is huge, that and a huge parallel to the cannabis industry, not just here in California, but nationwide. So I definitely wanted to speak on that. And then again, just mentioning, how uh, Organic Valley's success is also um, he's attributing to their values and the integrity that they've upheld, whether or not that's from the Amish Mennonite communities, and then just their overall mission. So George is obviously a really value-driven individual, so that's just something also we should all keep in mind. I imagine everybody is here because they share those similar values and that integrity. So just hold that within yourself, because it's right, and just keep going, like you said. Um,
And
thanks, everyone.
Indy, is our grand timing moment here federal legalization? I mean, I've always had it in my head that if we can build some sort of infrastructure before federal legalization, then when that huge change happens, then we'll have something in place.
Yeah. Well, I think folks are laying the groundwork for like a national, like Ross is here with us, and he's a co-founder of the National Craft Cannabis Coalition. Um, and so it's doing that sort of work nationwide. Um, that foundation will be in existence, hopefully, when there is rescheduling, because it is on the horizon. It's going to happen eventually. There's so much talk of it. We hear it all the time. Whether Biden's going to do that before the election in November, we don't know. It's highly likely, some people say. So having these networks established, yeah, because that's again, that's where funding's going to come from. We can't, there's no Safe Banking Act yet. We can't go to a bank and get loans. Um, and again, he attributed their success also to securing that funding. So being able to access that money, that capital, um, but with that network already in place, established, that groundwork, that foundation, that I think is going to lead to success. And it feels like, the timing is kind of lining up for everybody. So kudos for everybody for being here and just taking part in all this.
Yeah. Great. I'm loving all the hands. We're going to get to everybody, Jeff, and then Chris, and then Ross.
Yeah, the parallels were amazing. I just kept reflecting. I mean, it was just, so I just want to say a few words. The foreclosures that we've been seeing, the failures that we've been seeing, we have been seeing suicide amongst farmers. The legislation is another situation that just really needs to change. The taxes, all those structures are just so limiting. I mean, just it produces what we've seen. Basically, a market that's just so difficult. And in the end, we need to raise our value to make it profitable. That's the whole point here. So that's, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, and he talked about raising value, and they took a big leap at Organic Valley to make a more expensive product and sell it. And they did it. Yeah, Ross.
I don't know if Chris wants to go ahead of me. I saw his hand was raised and then lowered. But
yeah,
you're
no, we're
okay.
going to get to everybody.
Go right ahead. Yeah.
cool. We'll just want to maybe offer some perspective on the sort of federal policy conversation and the timing conversation. So Indy mentioned, so I'm with Humboldt County Growers Alliance, where I'm policy director. Also, one of my other hats is with the National Craft Cannabis Coalition, which is a coalition of associations that represent small cannabis farmers in 5 different states right now. And my impression, at least tracking the national conversation, is that we've sort of, it's always 3 to 5 years away in terms of actually having federal legalization. And 3 years ago, I would have said it's 3 to 5 years away. And today I would still say it's 3 to 5 years away. There doesn't seem to be too much appetite in Congress or the presidential level for a real legalization of cannabis. And rescheduling to Schedule 3, while it does seem to be likely this year, definitely more likely than not. At least from what I've seen, it seems very unclear what the impact or implication of that would be. It's unlikely it would immediately open any kind of interstate commerce, but of course it could sort of push a conversation in that direction. It could also sort of push the conversation in the direction of pharmaceutical interests as well. So definitely risks, I think, too. So I feel like it's a really good time to start preparing and having these types of conversations for how do we exist and be successful in a world where we have a more normalized federally legal system. But just to the question of timing, at least based on what I am seeing, which is of course limited, it seems like we may still have several years or more before that really becomes a reality.
Thanks so much, Ross. I think if we can hang on, we need that time to build this infrastructure. So if it was tomorrow, we'd be fucked because the corporations would just take it over. Chris, I saw you lowered your hand, but please do share.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the reactions. Okay. I think I keep hitting it accidentally, but George had started to he said, actually somebody said he was going to get into kind of why co-ops generally have not succeeded. I think it's an important point to look into, not to be too overly negative, but just to kind of analyze the what could go wrong. One thing that he mentioned was farmers can get pulled away. They can get pulled away by other interests, other co-ops. That kind of, what have you done for me lately? If that there's something about that. What have you done for me lately? That comment kind of it's sitting in my head right now. As I can't place exactly where I just heard it, but there was a but I'm wondering exactly, and George said, well, maybe I could have built a better culture. I'm wondering what else it takes to keep farmers happy, to keep their interests.
Such a good question. Well, from my experience, which is less compared to George, but I can share that what have you done for me lately is a really important question. And I mean, one of the things is we get visionary and we get idealistic, and we might forget that co-op is just a business. And so you're completely regulated by being that. And the number of businesses that succeed and fail, the ratio is low for success. And so that's it. That is not changed at all by being a co-op. And then on top of that, you know, we're faced right now with in the cannabis economy where it's people's lives and livelihood and bottom line and existence which is on the line. And it's like, what have you done for me lately becomes a really important question, because you have to pay your bills and you have to go on, and so you're trying not to go under. And so I think we need timing, and I think we need magic. And I think, the folks that can, we're kind of like in a position where we're like, if we don't try to do this, nobody else is in California right now, to really advance this conversation. And so that's it. That's where we're starting. We're like, let's just advance the conversation and put as much resources as we can, because in the long run, maybe down the line, we'll be able to tell the story that it got started here. Otherwise, it didn't get started yet. But I think the bottom line is an absolute consideration that we need to hold. And then in terms of culture and values, it's like the governance structure, and the power struggles and what to do with all of that. That's huge. And one question I didn't get to ask George, but I'd like to, is how strong of the educational component was there? Because I really think that hearing this and having my own experience, ongoing continuous education, Underground has a university of cooperation. And it's like, it's got to go to that level, where we're learning all the time and we're constantly striving to improve our cooperative and our governance structure, because we're infants. And if we think we're grown-ups, we're wrong. So that's my 2 cents on that, and we can go into that more as we go along. I'd love to hear from Darwin. Oh, you're muted.
So now I'm unmuted.
There you go.
There we are.
Okay. I'm here representing an organization that you all need to be aware of. It is an organization that will help you become an adult. It will help you influence your legislatures. It will help you clarify and gain cred, if you will, across the board. And this is the Grange. The Grange is, thank you. I'm the president of the Laytonville Grange. And that encompasses the entire metroplex of Laytonville, California, all 300 of us. And it's
beautiful.
I'm glad you approve. Anyway, moving right along. The Grange is it's a local organization. I'm the president of the local. It's a county-wide organization. I am a member of what we call the Pomona Grange, which covers Mendocino and Lake counties. It is also a statewide organization. There is a California State Grange. We have lobbying organizations in Sacramento, in Washington, D.C., and in, I believe, 36 other state capitals around the country. We are nationwide, and we are looking for new blood. You may have noticed by my hair color that I wasn't born yesterday. All of the rest of you were. And we need you, we need your energy, and you need us. You need us because we already have that infrastructure. We already have the everything is set up so that you can be as effective as you can be. What we cannot do is we cannot do commercial enterprises. So for that, that's where CAN comes in. CAN gets to be a commercial enterprise. Perhaps. Right. I don't know. My crystal ball is cloudy. I cannot see the future. But I would recommend that each of you, especially if you're here in California, each of you has a Grange very close to you. Seek it out. Join it. Add your voice to ours. Become a part of it. And frankly, because all of the Grange members across the state are starting to look like me, you can take it over. You can take over. You can use what's already there with the rules in place. There is it's an excellent excellent organization because as a president, I don't get a vote in what we do. All I can do is make suggestions and referee the meetings. That's all I can do. And when you achieve a position of leadership in the Grange, your power gets drained away.
Mm-hmm.
When you are the lowest member of the Grange, you have the most power. And that needs to be the way everything gets set up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Darwin. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate that.
I hope that I've said something you can actually learn from, and that, yeah, we can make this go on.
Yeah,
I want to see this
absolutely.
work too.
We're going to take you very seriously, actually, and I know all of us at CAN have written Grange in our notes. Grange and labor is on there, so I really appreciate opening that conversation, and we are going to officially circle back on that as an organization. I want to move us forward and move us toward closure here today. We allowed this conversation to go because I think it was necessary, and we're building our network. Um, uh, and I just wanted us to finish up here by sharing a bit of the CAN vision, and really we're hoping that that's the community vision. And the short version is that we exist in an effort to protect small craft cannabis from corporate conglomeration. Um, and we think that cooperative structure, and not just formal cooperative, but all of the forms of informal cooperation that are already happening and can grow and become more robust, is part of that future. And just because, maybe we're small does not mean that we can't have a powerful voice and a powerful impact. And so what can exist to do is please continue to come to the Academy and continue to learn about these formal cooperative principles and these practices, and informal cooperative principles and practices, and be part of the vision and the conversation of what is possible when we build truly shared power. And if you just want to think about that again and again, shared power, and what is collective power. And actually the Grange movements and the labor movements and the early American socialist movements, they were all about that. So, there are, here we have Sean in the room. He's the owner at Salmon Creek Legacy Farms Cooperative, formed through this Academy process and through the efforts of CAN and with the support of Uplift Co-op, California's first cannabis co-op. And then we have visions for what to do about distribution, what to do about all the kinds of legislation and support that we need in policy, and all the different kinds and forms of the co-op. So I had a plan to go into that. Actually, George touched on it at the beginning. We will go into that in more detail. But I want to invite you all to take what we heard from George, translate that into a vision for cannabis, and consider yourself part of a group that is a think tank. And we actually, a part of our process here is going to be a think tank. We're looking to educate, but we're also looking to engage, and we're looking, this is movement building. And you are now part of that movement. I want to open it up to you, David, because I see your hands raised.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yep. Hi, first name David Allen. Bears easier. Yeah, I forgot to mention that also here in Providence, Rhode Island, we are attempting to not one but two cooperative retail cannabis stores in the cooperative business model. You can go look online and look for PVD Flowers. They are up and coming. I think they're like 3/4 of the way. Looking for funding and trying to get that part of it bottled in and knocked down. We have a fundraiser for them tomorrow night here in Providence. I'm sure you guys are in California and everywhere else, but Yeah, and then the second one that we're trying to put together is another store by the name of Free Your Mind Flowers, which is named after my younger brother who died of a drug overdose. And we are trying to also create that generational wealth with the cooperative business model through cannabis. So I just want to lay that out there, and maybe we can go into that next week.
Thanks so much, Bear. And I'm so glad to have the Rhode Island folks here. Just I won't I don't have time to give too much information, and you would do a better job, but we also have Emma coming on the Academy to share. And just Rhode Island is far, far ahead of where we are in California right now with support from the state and with the work that you're doing. And so that's an important model for us to look at, role model for us to look at, and a future that we want to look toward. Indy, don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you got geared up a little bit. Do you want to close us out with some bigger vision talk?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I think, George provided a lot of that bigger vision that I'd have been speaking to. Um, and it more or less kind of follows that whole his success as a, the largest organic, dairy co-op in the nation. Um, so, collaboration, it can be, again, it doesn't have to be formal. It could be simple and informal type of collaboration and cooperation, where organizations and individuals like ourselves collaborate to tackle these common goals. This could be to affect policy and regulation, and to coordinate different action. Like recently here in Humboldt County, we had a measure that came up, that was on our ballot this March 5th, and it took, quite a collaborative effort, led by our local Growers Alliance, which Ross is the policy director of the Humboldt County Growers Alliance, to defeat that. And that took, cooperation from all sorts of individual farmers and coordinated action, you know. And I do want to also just bring up to Darwin, thank you for bringing up that information about the Grange. I think that could be useful to all of us, even in Rhode Island. Um, making those alliances, joining up, and why reinvent the wheel if there's already, a wheel out there rolling along. Um, and as far as like a grander idea, there's really nothing that can really stop folks that are value aligned and have that integrity. And when we make these establish these connections, uh, not only in California, but across the country, we're really laying that groundwork and that pavement down. And um, again, when working together, with those aligned values, there's nothing that can stop us, whether it's for instance, let's look at the craft wine industry. The craft wine industry like represents only 4% of total production, of the wine market, but it also represents 40% of the total value. And so I think that's what we're all looking towards here, you know. How do we create that system, our own organic act, you know? How do we create our this craft system, where and build bridges to communities and consumers that really would be seeking out our products and really wanting to be shopping with us, because of our values and because of that integrity. So, really that's what this is all about. And of course, funding is a huge thing for us, and it's hard to attain that, with federal prohibitions and just a lack of access to banking. Even getting grants is difficult because a lot of those are federally funded, So, going back to, what Ross was saying earlier too about rescheduling, we don't know what that has in store for us really. It could maybe open up banking possibly, but that's going to open up banking for, these large corporations that look to consolidate industry as well, and they operate on debt, So just again, just underlining the importance of establishing the connections that we got here. Uh, really thinking about, you know, this Grange idea Darwin brought up. I think that's fantastic. That's what we're looking for. And just holding that space for each other and keeping this going, because I do think, you know, whether federal legalization is, you know, 3 to 5 years away, which is likely, you know, there's probably very little appetite to just legalize or decriminalize across the board. But that does give us time, you know, and to lay this groundwork and foundation. And so yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And if anybody else has any comments or questions, just feel free to chime in or whatever, raise your hand. It's all good.
I wanted to just quickly circle back to something George said actually with Margaret Mead's quote, and never doubt a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Only it's indeed the only thing that ever has. And I truly resonate with that. It's something that I mean, I'm technically the second generation of the farm, you know, and I feel like that whole value proposition of like, what is the co-op doing for me? Something I'm constantly battling for, but I'm a productive activist, totally, and back to the landers. So there's how to find that balance and ethic in multi-generational co-ops, and these are questions that we have to chew on. And the same thing, hopefully next week we can talk a little bit more about that, along with you know, what is shared power and how does that help create economic resilience. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, everybody. We will be meeting same time, same place next week, where we're going to get into the fundamentals of cooperation, both formal and informal cooperation.